What happens when one of Australia's most beloved wildlife conservationists walks onto a morning talk show expecting a friendly chat, only to be blindsided by a host with a personal agenda? You're about to witness one of the most jaw-dropping live television moments in recent memory. Trust me, the fallout is unforgettable. But before we dive into this train wreck, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment on hosts who skip doing their homework before interviews, because what you're about to see proves why preparation is everything. Robert Irwin, son of the legendary Steve Irwin, arrived thinking he'd discuss his latest wildlife documentary and ongoing conservation projects. At just 20, he had been touring talk shows, charming audiences with his infectious passion for animals while carrying on his father's legacy. Every other interview had gone smoothly, respectful hosts, thoughtful questions, and Robert's natural charisma shining through as he spoke about protecting endangered species. But Joy Behar had other plans. The moment Robert stepped onto the stage, the energy shifted. The usual warm welcome was gone, replaced by a sharp, almost predatory smile from Joy. The other hosts were unusually quiet, almost as if they sensed what was coming but couldn't intervene. Robert, polite and professional, smiled and waved to the audience, completely unaware he was walking into a verbal ambush. "Welcome back to The View," Joy said, her tone carrying an edge the audience hadn't yet caught. "We're here with Robert Irwin, wildlife conservationist and son of the late Steve Irwin. Now, Robert, I have to ask you something that's been bothering me for quite some time." Robert shifted in his seat, media training kicking in as he maintained his composed smile. "Of course, Joy, I'm happy to answer any questions." "Good," she said, leaning forward like a predator locking onto its prey. "I've been watching your interviews, your documentaries, your whole public persona, really. And I have to wonder, aren't you just riding on your father's coattails? What have you actually accomplished on your own?" A hush fell over the studio. The camera caught Robert's smile, faltering for a heartbeat, but only a heartbeat. Years of defending his father's legacy had prepared him for this. "Well, Joy, I understand why people might think that," he said evenly, though tension crept into his voice. "But I've been working in wildlife conservation since I was a child. I've rescued thousands of animals. I've helped develop breeding programs for endangered species. I've dedicated my life to continuing my father's work." Joy wasn't satisfied. In fact, she was just getting started. "But that's exactly my point," she pressed, voice sharpening. "You're continuing his work, but where's your original contribution? It seems like you're just playing dress-up in khakis, pretending to be Steve Irwin. Don't you think it's time to find your own identity?" The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. Willie Goldberg looked ready to intervene, but Joy was on a roll. Robert inhaled deeply, fighting to stay composed. "Joy, with all due respect, conservation isn't about personal glory or making a name for yourself. It's about protecting animals and their habitats. Whether I continue my father's work or carve my own path, the important thing is that the work gets done." "Oh, please," Joy scoffed, rolling her eyes on live television. "That's a convenient answer. You're afraid to step out from behind your father's reputation because you know you don't have what it takes to succeed on your own. You're 20, Robert Wynn. Are you going to grow up and stop playing with animals?" Something changed then. The polite, media-trained smile vanished, replaced by a fierce, authentic intensity. His jaw tightened, hands gripping the arms of his chair, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the entire studio sit up. "Playing with animals," Robert repeated, his Australian accent thickening with emotion. "Joy, do you even know what my work involves? Last month, I helped save a mother koala and her joey from a bushfire. The breeding program I helped develop reintroduced species to areas where they'd been extinct for 30 years. Joy tried to interrupt, but Robert continued. "You want to talk about growing up? Let me tell you about growing up. I watched my father get bitten by venomous snakes while relocating them away from towns. I helped my mother run a wildlife hospital treating over 100,000 injured animals. Conservation isn't a game or a career. It's a responsibility. The tension was palpable. The audience was silent, hanging on every word, and the other hosts looked genuinely concerned about where this confrontation was heading. Joy, however, misread Robert's passion as weakness, and that would be her critical mistake. "Look, Robert, I understand you're emotional about this," Joy said, her tone dripping with condescension in a way that made viewers at home cringe. "But emotion doesn't change facts. The fact is, you're famous because your father was famous. Without the Irwin name, you'd just be another guy playing with animals in a zoo. Maybe it's time you accepted that and found a real career." Robert went completely still. The kind of still that predators notice right before their prey either runs or fights. And make no mistake, Robert Irwin was every bit his father's son, a real career. He repeated quietly, but there was a weight behind the words that made everyone in the studio lean in. "Joy, do you even know what my father was doing when he died?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Joy, clearly caught off guard, blinked and shifted in her seat, the first trace of unease since the interview began. But Robert wasn't fishing for sympathy. He was about to make a point, and everyone in that studio could sense it. He was filming a documentary about stingrays. Robert continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. "Not for fame, not for money, but to teach people that even the most feared creatures in the ocean are just trying to survive. He died doing what he loved, but more importantly, he died trying to make the world a better place for animals who can't speak for themselves." Joy opened her mouth to interrupt, but Robert cut her off. The authority in his voice brooked no argument. "You want to talk about real careers? My father could have made millions doing circus acts with crocodiles. He could have turned Australia's zoo into a theme park focused on entertainment. But he didn't. He chose education. He chose research. He chose to use his platform to make people care about wildlife conservation." The camera panned to Joy's face, her expression slowly shifting from confident smugness to dawning realization. She had miscalculated. The young man across from her wasn't naive, and he wasn't intimidated. He had grown up in the spotlight, learned how to wield media attention with precision, and now he was focused completely on making her understand the magnitude of her mistake. "And you know what, Joy?" Robert leaned forward, intensity radiating from every word. "Every day I wake up and try to live up to that legacy. Not for fame, not for accolades, but because the work matters. Do you understand how many species have gone extinct just in the time we've been sitting here? Do you understand that there are animals alive today because of the conservation programs my family has developed?" Whoopi Goldberg tried to interject. "Robert, we appreciate your passion, and I think what Joy was trying to say." "No. Whoopi," Robert said firmly, not taking his eyes off Joy. "I know exactly what Joy was trying to say. She was trying to diminish my work and my father's legacy because she thinks conservation is just playing with animals. Because I'm young. Because I'm passionate. Somehow that makes my work less legitimate." Joy finally spoke again, but her tone had shifted. Gone was the aggressive confidence. Now it sounded defensive. "Robert, I think you're overreacting. I was just asking legitimate questions about your career path." "Legitimate questions." Robert's voice rose, frustration cutting through every syllable. "Joy, you accused me of playing dress-up and told me to find a real career. How is that a legitimate question? Would you ask David Attenborough if he was just playing with animals? Would you tell Jane Goodall to find a real job?" The audience murmured. Some shook their heads, disbelief etched across their faces. Joy's composure was slipping. She tried a softer approach. Look, Robert, maybe there's been a misunderstanding. I was just trying to explore whether young people in your position feel pressure to follow in their parents' footsteps. No, Joy, Robert snapped, voice cutting through the studio like a whip. There's no misunderstanding. You specifically said I was afraid to step out from behind my father's reputation. You said I don't have what it takes to make it on my own. The tension was electric. The audience was on the edge of their seats. And everyone knew, as the studio lights glinted off the stage, that Robert Irwin was about to deliver the final, unflinching truth that would leave Joy scrambling for answers. You told me to stop playing with animals and find a real career, Robert said, his voice low but deadly calm. Those weren't questions about pressure. Those were attacks on my character, on my life's work. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. Sarah Haynes stared at her notes. Alyssa Farah Griffin fiddled nervously with her earpiece. Whoopi Goldberg looked like she was calculating how to salvage the situation. But Robert wasn't finished. In fact, he was just getting started. You want to talk about pressure, Joy? The pressure isn't living up to my father's legacy. The pressure is sitting here listening to someone who hasn't spent 5 minutes researching my work, telling me conservation doesn't matter. The pressure is trying to explain to someone who gets paid to have opinions why saving endangered species is more important than television ratings. Joy's face flushed red. Now wait just a minute, young man. No, you wait, Robert interrupted, his voice carrying an authority that made the studio freeze. I've been polite. I've been respectful. I've answered your questions, even when they were clearly designed to make me look bad. But I will not sit here and let you insult my father's memory or diminish work that literally saves lives. The tension was so thick it could be cut with a knife. The audience was silent. The other hosts looked like they wished the floor would swallow them whole. Joy was now scrambling, realizing she had underestimated him. I never insulted your father's memory, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Really? Robert raised an eyebrow. You said I was living in his shadow. You said I was afraid to make it on my own. You said I was playing dress-up in khakis, pretending to be him. If that's not insulting his memory, then what exactly would you call it? Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Robert pressed on. And here's what really bothers me. Joy, you're attacking a 20-year-old who has dedicated his life to conservation, while you make a living giving hot takes on television. You want to talk about real careers? You want to talk about making a difference? How many animals have you saved? How many species have you helped protect? How many young people have you inspired to care about something bigger than themselves? The studio was dead silent. You could practically hear the producers debating whether to cut to commercial. Joy looked like she'd been slapped, and the other hosts exchanged stunned glances. They'd never seen anything like this, but Joy Behar didn't become a television host by backing down. And despite being clearly outmatched, she decided to double down. You know what, Robert? Maybe I touched a nerve. Maybe that's what you needed, someone to remind you that not everyone thinks you're special just because of your last name. That was it. That was the spark. Robert Irwin's transformation was instant and shocking. His hands gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles whitened. His jaw clenched, and his voice dropped to a level of controlled fury that froze the entire studio. Special because of my last name, Robert repeated, dangerously quiet. Joy, do you have any idea what you just said? Joy's eyes widened. Robert, I think we should know. Absolutely not. Robert cut her off, standing in one fluid motion. You just told me that people only think I'm special because of my last name. My father's name. The name of a man who died trying to make the world better for animals. So let me tell you exactly what that name means to me. The camera captured every moment as Robert loomed over the hosts. This wasn't the polished, media-trained young conservationist anymore. This was raw emotion, focused, commanding, and undeniably real. That name means getting up at 4 a.m. to deliver baby animals, because nature doesn't care about your schedule. That name means spending my childhood learning to read the body language of crocodiles, because one mistake could kill you. That name means watching my father get attacked by animals he was trying to save, and never hearing him blame them for following their instincts. Joy tried again. "Robert, please sit down." "I'm not sitting down." Robert snapped, his Australian accent thick with emotion. "You wanted this conversation, so we're having it. That name you think makes me special. It also means growing up under the gaze of millions, knowing people are waiting for me to fail, waiting to say I'm not as good as my father. It means carrying the weight of a legacy that changed how the world thinks about wildlife conservation." The other hosts were frozen. The audience was riveted, every phone recording what was already shaping up to be one of the most explosive live television moments in years. And you know what? Joy. Robert's voice rose, unrelenting. "I'm not ashamed of that name. I'm not afraid of that legacy. Because every time someone tells me I'm just riding coattails, every time someone like you suggests I should find a real career, it reminds me exactly why this work matters. It reminds me that some people care more about tearing others down than building anything up themselves." Joy's face burned red, whether with embarrassment or anger. No one could tell. "Young man, you need to calm down and show some respect," she said. "Respect?" Robert's voice cracked with disbelief. "You want to talk to me about respect? You ambushed me on live television. You attacked my character, my work, and my father's memory." Robert said every word landing with surgical precision. "You told me to stop playing with animals and get a real job. And now you want to lecture me about respect." He stepped closer to the host table, and even without seeing them, everyone could sense the security team off camera shifting their weight, waiting for a cue that hadn't come yet. "Let me tell you about respect, Joy," he continued. "Respect is doing your homework before interviewing someone. Respect is asking questions that actually matter instead of manufacturing drama for ratings. Respect is understanding that there are things in this world more important than your personal opinions about a person you've never bothered to learn about." Studio went still, so still the cameras adjusting their lenses sounded loud. Every single person in that room understood they were witnessing something that would be replayed for years. "I came here today to talk about wildlife conservation," Robert said, his voice trembling with real emotion. "I came here to talk about animals that are dying while we sit here arguing. I came here to talk about research programs that could save species from extinction. But instead, you decided to turn this into a spectacle because you thought it'd be fun to watch a 20-year-old get flustered on national television." Joy finally found her voice, though it emerged small and defensive. "That was never my intention." "Your intention doesn't matter anymore, Joy," Robert fired back. "What matters is the result. What matters is that millions of people just watched you dismiss the work of someone who has dedicated his entire life to conservation. What matters is that you used your platform to tear down instead of lift up." He paused one deep breath, and when he spoke again, the fury had cooled into something far steadier, far more powerful. "My father always said the most dangerous animal in the wild isn't the one that attacks you. It's the one that makes you forget why you're there in the first place." He let that sit. Let it land. "Well, Joy, congratulations. Because for a moment today, you almost made me forget why I do this. You almost made me defend myself instead of defending the animals who can't speak for themselves." The camera caught Joy's expression, shock melting into something close to regret as she realized just how badly this had gone. This wasn't about media training. This was a young man speaking with a fire she had badly underestimated. But here's what you didn't count on. Robert continued, his voice regaining strength. You didn't count on the fact that I believe in this work. You didn't count on the fact that this isn't a career, it's a calling. And you definitely didn't count on the fact that the best teacher I ever had showed me exactly how to handle people who don't understand that some things are bigger than their own egos. He unclipped his microphone pack with calm, deliberate movements. The signal was unmistakable. The interview was over. So, thank you, Joy, he said. Thank you for reminding me why this work matters. Thank you for showing everyone watching what happens when someone attacks conservation just to stir the pot. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell millions of people that conservation is not a game. It's not playing with animals. And it is definitely not something you do for fame. He set the mic pack down on the chair, then looked straight into the camera. If you're watching this at home and you care about wildlife, if you want to support real conservation efforts, if you believe that protecting endangered species matters more than television drama, please look up the work we're doing at Australia Zoo. Because unlike some people, we're actually trying to make the world better instead of just talking about it. And with that, Robert Irwin turned and walked off the view set, leaving Joy Behar speechless, the other host slack-jawed, and millions of viewers witnessing one of the most powerful defenses of conservation ever broadcast live. The camera lingered on Joy's face, her usual quick wit nowhere to be found before the show abruptly cut to commercial. But the damage was done. Robert Irwin had just delivered a masterclass in standing up for what you believe in. And Joy Behar had learned the hard way that some people don't get bullied no matter how big the stage. What did you think of that explosive confrontation? Have you ever seen someone stand up for their beliefs like that on live television? Drop a comment below.